Everybody doing today? God is good. And one of the things he's good about, aside from many, many other traits, is God's way of doing things. If we buy into them, they seem crazy at first. They even seem limiting. They seem countercultural. They may even seem a little weird. But when we buy into them, there turns out to be lasting rewards so numerous that a lot of them can't even begin to be contemplated or figured out ahead of time. You see, and Eugene Peterson calls serving God a long obedience in the same direction. And what he contends, and C.S. Lewis writes about this too, is each day you are given an opportunity to say yes or no to God. It may be what you decide to do with your time. It may be the decisions you make, what to do with your abilities. It may seem a decision what you do when someone presents an opportunity to gossip or hurt others. It may be an opportunity to give. It may be an opportunity to be dishonest. But as we say the little yeses with our day, there begins a pattern that escalates into long-term results that are amazing and have a deeper, more seated, earthier, positive effect on ourselves. In fact, as we contemplate these things and as we buy in, we come to a time, and this happens many times, where we look back and go, God, thank you for directing me to do this. Or God, your ways have led me to places and to character and to abilities I never would have dreamed before. I couldn't have conceived of being where I am right now in Christ. And this is the beauty of this thing. I don't know if I've read the book Moneyball and seen the movie. Have any of you seen? Yeah, quite a few of you. This is a true story. A number of years ago, about 15 or 16, the Oakland Athletics in baseball has no salary cap. So what they instead do is each team has the ability to sign as many players and pay them as much money as they want to. And this system has, at least for a while, really backfired in baseball in that you have a few teams who can buy so many players and have so much money that they have what seems like an unfair advantage. Now, about 10 years ago, when the steroid scandals all happened, they took steroids out of baseball. This has really leveled the playing field a lot, and there are a lot better small marketing teams. But there was a general manager, a man named Billy Beane, who was hired by the Oakland Athletics. Oakland was the last place you wanted to be a general manager. They had no money. And in fact, every time Oakland developed a good player, they were on a clock because they knew they would not be able to keep that player. And so they were forced in a position where really they were more like a minor league team that trained players so they could go win World Series on other players. And nobody wanted in Oakland. But they hired a man named Billy Beane. Billy Beane at one time had been a #1 draft pick in baseball. Everybody thought he was going to be an all-star. And so he was drafted #1. And he had a cup of coffee in the major leagues, but he was never able to make it. And all the scouts had said Billy Beane should be a star, but his baseball career failed. But he had one thing going for him, is he was an incredibly intelligent person, and he has ice water running through his veins. He is willing to do things differently. So when he approached the Oakland Athletics and they hired him, he said, I'm going to completely redo how we do baseball. He said, there's no way we can keep up with the Yankees or any of these teams. And he said, I've found a way that we don't have to. And so what he did is he took players like Scott Hattenberg. Hattenberg had been a catcher. And Hattenberg blew out his arm and wasn't able to be a catcher anymore because a catcher has to throw to second base. And so what Billy Beane observed in Hattenberg, this player that nobody else wanted, was that if he could train him to play first base, Hattenberg's ability to get on base was actually equal or close to Giambi's, the all-star first baseman that just left. In fact, what Billy Beane said is, we're not going to focus on our all-star players. What we're going to focus on is what they've done up to now and what we need in order to win so many games. And so he said, okay, we have 162 games this season. We need 400 and something home runs. We need an on-base percentage of such and such. And so he took players that nobody else wanted because he recognized that, yeah, sure, he lost a first baseman who could hit 40 home runs, but if he could get a guy here that hit 12, and he could improve this guy from 14 to 16, and he could put an outfielder that had an on-base of this, he could actually buy wins. And so what he did is he took all these cast-offs, baseball players, and he put them on the field, and in 2000, I think it was 2001, the Oakland Athletics won 20 games in a row. And season after season after season, this little small market team, which each year had to kiss its all-stars goodbye, kept putting these new players into the system and were winning all the time. They were winning an incredible amount of games based on the science of what he did. You see, Major League Baseball scouting for years had been based on what the scouts saw. It was kind of a gut thing. Oh, this kid throws really well, or this kid can hit well, or, you know, and they would look at a athlete and they'd say, this man would make a great baseball player. Sometimes that works, but a lot of times it wasn't. One of the funniest things that happened was Billy Beane, normally to sign your first-round draft pick cost a lot of money, and the Oakland Athletics didn't have a lot of money. So what he would do is he would find a baseball player to draft in the first round that had no chance of being drafted in the first round. He would go to them and say, if I drafted you in the first round, would you take this much money? And the players would go, sure. One of the baseball players he signed was a catcher. He was a catcher who had a weight problem. And this young man had been in the minor leagues, been in his high school and his college baseball, and nobody wanted this guy. He wasn't on the radar of anybody, but he entered the draft. One of Billy Beane's assistants came to him and said, you see this guy? He said, I want to show you some videotape of this guy. So anyways, the young man's up to bat, and he hits the ball, hits it really hard, and he runs down to first base and trips over first base and falls flat on his face, and everybody's laughing. Anyways, he stood up on first base thinking he'd hit a single, and the young man said, see this videotape, Billy? He said, yeah. He said, I know it looks bad on him and all this kind of stuff. The problem was this young man had hit the ball so hard it actually went 60 feet beyond the wall. He had hit a home run. He wasn't even aware he had done it. And these were the type of players Billy Beane would sign. And many of these players would make their way up, and he's still considered one of the best general managers in baseball. He thought differently. He took a system that thought a certain way, and he thought completely differently on it. Today we're talking about weird. This is the last week on our weird series. For a few weeks we're going to wander around with Moses in the wilderness. But this week we want to talk about a weird view of money, and I want to introduce a concept to you that may seem at first like, wow, that's a different way of looking at things. But this actually affects this area of our lives so dramatically that it is the same kind of thing. Steps we take today have long-lasting results. Okay? And here's our focus first today. One of the things in the book of Proverbs is every once in a while, I mean, there's all kinds of very profound things in the book of Proverbs. I always tell young men and women, you know, one of the greatest things you can do is read the book of Proverbs, because it has all kinds of life lessons where you can learn from other people's mistakes and get to a place where you're making good decisions and things like that. But this one is nestled in there, and it's really interesting because it's a lot different than many of the other Proverbs. And when you first read it, you're kind of like, okay, what does that mean? And here it is. Where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint, but blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instruction. I have it in a different translation here, and I'll just read it here for you as well. When people do not accept divine guidance, they run wild, but whoever obeys the law is joyful. There is something in our world that is propagated, it's not just Western culture, it's international, about finding yourself and developing a belief system that fits you, okay? And I don't know if it's the amount of commercialization or things that we have directed towards us, but the idea of doing something for yourself is now seen not only as a benefit or a reward, but actually is seen as a right, okay? And which is fine if you're buying a t-shirt. I got a new shirt. You like it? Yeah, it's pretty good, eh? Yeah. Yeah, I got some new shoes this week too. They're really cool. In fact, they were so cool, I got home and one of my kids stole one of them from me, one pair of shoes, and so I had to go get some more. But anyways, what was I talking about? It's fine when you're talking about a shirt. It's fine when you say, I achieved this goal, therefore I got a raise at work. Okay? It can be excessive. But where it's really dangerous is when it comes to faith. I was at a wedding a few weeks ago, and I was doing this wedding, and it doesn't happen very often, but at this wedding, there was an individual there, a young man, who thought, oh, cool, I have a minister. I'm going to bombard him with all kinds of difficult questions and make his life miserable. And so he picked on me. So he came over. And he said, what's your view on this? And I learned long ago, just like Jesus, reply to a question with a question. So I said, why do you ask? He said, well, I'm just interested in knowing this. I said, well, do you mean this or this? He said, well, maybe this. What about this? Is this wrong? Well, yeah, that's wrong. How do you know it's wrong? Well, because it is, obviously. I said, there's many places in the world maybe that's not wrong. How do you know that's wrong? He said, well, it's legally recognized. I said, well, yeah, but there's lots of laws in the world, and all those things are changing all the time. How do you know they're right? Well, society supports it. Well, societies come and go, and they change. 50 years ago, you go in a medical office, a doctor would recommend smoking to improve your voice. So how do you know society is right? Well, it's just generally held beliefs. I said, well, there's some places in the world where they teach you to love your neighbor. There's other places they teach you to eat your neighbor. How do you know which one's right? He said, what are you getting at? I said, as soon as you start talking about morals, they have to come from somewhere. And he said, well, I believe this. And he said, someday I'm going to find a religion that's going to teach me to love and be tolerant, and is going to teach me to be happy in myself and to help me gain my goals and all these kind of things like that. I said, so you want to find a religion like that? He said, yeah. He said, when I listened to your sermon when you're at the wedding, he said, you sound like, that kind of guy. I said, but you want me as the kind of guy who's going to make you happy and all that. I said, but it seems like when it comes to anything I would ever say no to with you, that you're not happy with that. He said, no, of course not. I said, so basically, I said, trust me with this, you want to find a religion that basically does what you want it to. He said, yeah. I said, well, I'll save you the quest. I said, and answer this. I said, actually, what you worship is yourself. He looked at me. I said, you're basically designing a God that does whatever you want it to. I said, so don't bother looking around the world religions. You're already there, man. He said, well, that's... I said, you know what? You are worshiping yourself. He says, you know what? I think you're right. I said, well, that's kind of the thing. The question is who says no to you? Because behind every moral code, there is a moral lawgiver. There has to be. There has to be. Now, here's the interesting thing about our society. our society or our world, and this is universal concept, applies to all people in all times and all places. The scriptures say, where there is no revelation, where there is no higher moral authority, there's no God who gives us those moral codes, it says the people cast off restraint. Another translation says the people run wild. The people, another translation says the people perish. What that means is people, in lieu of a higher moral authority or higher God, basically do whatever they want to do. And they all run hither and yon, eventually to their own destruction. And this definitely occurs in our society, in all kinds of unhealthy ways. A good example is many of us eat ourselves to death. Heart disease is a major killer of people in our society, and a lot of times it stems from unhealthy diets. There's one proverb that says that gluttony is digging a grave with your teeth, which I thought was kind of insightful and gross at the same time. But the idea is that we indulge ourselves so much that we end up, a lot of times, the things we love are killing us. They're literally killing us. Atheistic writer Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. Did anybody make you read that in high school? Yeah, I remember that in high school. He wrote 100 years ago, or 100 and something years ago, about this ideal society, or where society was heading. And he had several classes in the society, and what the society used to regulate themselves in this perfect society was medication. So everybody took different medications. Nobody had babies. They did everything by test tube and all that. It is incredible how insightful this book was. And Aldous Huxley took this culture and this world, and he projected it, and he portrayed it as being a nightmare. He said, at some point, we are going to strike the pleasure centers of ourselves so much that everything will lose meaning. We will indulge ourselves so much, we will run wild so much that we will stop feeling pleasure, because we'll have strike those pleasure centers so much. And you get a society where we overeat, overspend, oversexed, over all these things. And we end up in a place where the people run wild because we cast off that moral restraint. Where God is and where his morals come from, we replace them with our own. And just like the book of Judges, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So what does this mean for us today? And what in the world does this mean for finances? Well, a perfect example of this can be seen in the finances of our day and age. Okay? Now, every time I talk about finances, I know people may get a little squirmy and all that. Why is that? Well, the God of our age, the God of our society is money. You get all kinds of, there's a lot of funny sayings out there, but, I hear being rich doesn't make you happy, but I'd at least like to try it. Money can solve all things, and all these kind of things. Hey, it's nice to have money. It's nice to have excess money. It's nice to be able to buy nice things and all that. And in itself, these things can be innocent and godly. But in excess, when they replace that higher moral authority, the one instead takes place is we end up running wild, and we lead to our own demise. Okay? And so this is something may apply for you in anything, any part of it could be gambling, it could be excessive drinking, it could be all these kind of things, but the excess that our culture encourages us with. Now, one thing, a point of reference with this, our culture is really interesting because what they do is they want you to dance as close to the line to excess as they can, and then they punish you for it. They really do. So they'll say, have a drink, party, have another drink, go to this place, go to this, all kinds of things. And if someone gets drunk and hurts somebody in a car, oh, you're a drunk driver. We hate drunk drivers. We'll condemn you, we'll fine you, all those kind of things. And so what we do is we entice people to the line, but at the same time, as soon as they mess up, we jump all over them and peck them to death like seagulls on a wounded comrade. We'll say, you know, with our culture, we'll say, you know what, intimacy is this, and so we'll make sex cheap, and we'll make it accessible, and we'll make it easy to find and all that. We'll do all those kind of things. But as soon as someone is unfaithful to her husband, oh, she's a bad person. She went too far. And so they give with one hand and take back in the other. And so I'm going to talk today just about a few principles Scripture teaches that are weird, but have incredible benefits in regard to finances. Okay? You with me? Walk you through 3. You're not with me? Nobody's shaking their head, nobody's bobbing or weaving or anything like that. At least nobody's asleep, right? Got your attention. Okay, the first one is this, Proverbs 22:7. The rich rule over the poor, the borrower is slave to the lender. This has been really all over the news lately, primarily with governments and provinces borrowing money and spending money to excess. In our culture, a lot of times now, governments, recognizing this kind of selfish demeanor we have, will make promises. Okay? Now, most of us know that a lot of politicians' promises aren't really worth much, right? Because a lot of times they change. All right? They'll blame it on the former government or anything like that. But it's very common in our culture and in our world for governments to spend more than they bring in, which is really incredible when you think about it, because in some places, Canada or other countries, they bring enormous amount of income in on taxes. Enormous, I mean billions and trillions of dollars. But at the same time, spend beyond that and seem to have no scruples about doing it. And so the country that actually has a balanced budget looks really weird in our world. And government doing this, we just had the European crisis where we have countries, you know, where they're saying you need to pay your bills. And the people in the country are going, we're being oppressed. They're so mean to us. They're actually making us have responsibility with our finances. And actually people are listening to this going, yeah, those poor people. Instead of looking at it and going, okay, there's 2 things wrong here. Who lends money to people who can't pay it back? And who borrows money that you know you can't pay back? And it's a living for the minute thing. But here's the thing. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. As soon as we're in debt, we are basically stuck in this world. Okay? Now, there are some debts for appreciable items like a house and that. You can't buy a house outright. If you can, it's fantastic. But there are many other things that we buy to feel better, or we buy to keep up with the Joneses, or we buy because bigger is better, or we buy because he who dies with the most toys wins. All these kind of things that are about stoking this run wild mentality that the book of Proverbs talks about. Basically are casting off the higher moral authority of God, who says, you know what makes you special? What makes you special is that I made you, and I love you, and you are important because I attribute worth to you. I want you to be my child. I sent my son to die for you so you could receive a free gift. I invite you into my family. I reward you for things you should have done anyways. A good, grace-filled God. But instead, in order to control our lives, which is what we think, we cast that off and we instead do things our own way. And so we go into retail therapy, or we drink ourselves to excess, or we spend beyond our means. And the reason we do this is because we're looking for something that only God can provide. So this is the first principle. So the question is, are you in horrible debt? Studies show that probably there's quite a few of us here that have a lot of debt. And what I would encourage you to do is sit down with a pen and paper, look at your income, look at your output, do all those things, do up a budget, and start to turn the corner to where you are living within your means, where you are giving to God and living within your means, and where you are not buying things to feel better, but instead When you purchase something, it's based on need, and it's based on having the money ahead of time and begin to pay back your debts. There are all kinds of wonderful organizations out right now that will help you to do that. They're all over the place, and we have people within our own church who will help coach you with that. Why? Because it borrows a slave to the lender. Where there is no vision or no higher moral authority, people cast off restraint. The second principle is this: the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but the food gulps theirs down. The second principle that I'm talking about here is the idea of anticipating expenses and saving ahead for them. This may have to do with your retirement. This may have to do with planning for Christmas. This may have to do for planning for your birthday or a trip or anything like that, to where you go, it's easy now to throw it on my credit card, or it's easy now to not think about my retirement, not think about these things, but the godly way is to anticipate it and to look ahead and to go, God, what do I need to do? What can I save today? What can I put away? What can I invest in? Randy Alcorn says that when we invest in the kingdom of God, you can't take it with you, but you can send it ahead of you. The idea, and I'm not just talking about your church, but to the poor, to the needy, to all those things, that is an investment. Some people save to give. Others save to retire. Others save so that they pay for things ahead of time. With my wife and I, we used to do the finances. I used to do them. And Christmas was always a scramble because you guys know I'm a little bit of a sap at Christmas. Anybody pick up on that in the last few years? Yeah. We start decorating the day after Halloween and all that kind of stuff. I'm kind of Christmas is cool. When I was growing up, we didn't have a lot. I joked with my kids that we were so poor, we used to go to Kentucky Fried Chicken to lick other people's fingers. But the one time a year where my family went all out was Christmas. And so I'm kind of a sap that way. But when I did the finances, Christmas was always a nightmare because I would overspend, and then January, February, March, we were paying back what we did. We made the very good choice a number of years ago, about 20 years ago, to put my wife in front of in charge of the finances. And now every year when we go into Christmas, Krista says, okay, here's what we have. This is where it can go. And she's sitting down there with her pencil and her pen and doing all those kind of things and all that. And every year at Christmas, we come out of Christmas in the black because she saves all year so that Christmas we have what we need ahead of time. It may seem silly and common sense, but the truth of the matter is that goes a long way, because the slave is the borrower is a slave to the lender, and the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but if food gulps theirs down. I'm bragging on my wife a little bit today, but there's another thing she does, and she's going to probably kill me for this, but we have every year we get the Wall of Charmin going. We buy our toilet paper in one shop. We're aware of a sale where it goes on sale once a year for a couple of weeks. And this mad woman says, pick up more Charmin, pick up more Charmin. And so you go into our basement, there is a wall 10 feet high of Charmin TP. And that lasts us the whole year. And she plans it perfectly. Right now we have 2 stacks left and the sale is in 2 weeks. Some people should be on medication for that. But what she does is she plans it ahead. She does it with our laundry detergent, all kinds of things. And we save every year. We save hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Why? Because the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but the fools gulp theirs down. Third principle. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? Here's the planning aspect of it. Jesus was talking about salvation with this. But in our day and age, it's good planning. My wife and I, we take our first tithe and we give it to God. We've been doing it so long, I don't even think about it. The only time I really think about it is I kind of go, oh, cool, our tithe check's going in. And I remember that week for the church and all that. But we've always given our first to God. And then we look at our retirement and we invest in those kind of things. And we look ahead for Christmas and those kind of things. And we anticipate those things. And we put away. Why? Because we plan. This is a really interesting thing. We have more money given to us from more places. We are higher wage earners and all the things that are going ever in society. We are the most affluent society of all time. There's talks about it going down now, and there's some signs of recession and decline. But the truth of the matter is we are blessed in our world. If you ever think you're not blessed, I encourage you, travel to Guatemala or Costa Rica or Haiti or one of these places and see how some people live in the world. I'll never forget one time in Honduras, we took a team down there, and one of the people with some, kind of foresight brought a bag of soccer balls and would give a soccer ball to each village. And that soccer ball was gold to those people, that they had a real soccer ball to play because they lived in such abject poverty that they made everything last. A shirt that belonged to one brother would go to the next brother, would go to the next brother, and a lot of times you see these little kids with these big shirts on because that's all they had. Yeah, we have so much. God has been so good to us. To live in Canada, don't feel guilty for it. Thank the Lord for it. It is a gift. But as it is a gift, our money isn't given to us to be ours. We are stewards of it. And so as you look ahead at what God is doing in your life, and you look ahead at what God, how he does finances and things, look ahead and go, what's the cost? How can I anticipate things? How can I think ahead? How can I, let's say, and there's a good argument for this. Let's say I was out of work. What happens if I lose my job? Can I put 1, 2, 3 months away? Can I do that? Is CPP going to be enough for me? Well, perhaps I should plan on something else. Should I get some RSPs? I'd like to get to know God more and more. And one of the first challenges he made to his disciples was a monetary one. He said to his disciples, he said, leave your leave your nets on the beach and come follow me. The first decision they made was an economic one. Jesus always, what his first challenge to people was a monetary one. What are you willing to give up? And so this is 100 level Christianity, it really is. And so in giving our finances and honoring God with that, you know what ends up happening? All of a sudden the responsibility for bringing in finances isn't mine anymore. I've entrusted it to God. By trusting him with my first fruits or with my tithe and my offering, I'm saying to God, I trust you. And when you say I trust you to God, and all of a sudden things are coming up short and you don't have enough rent or you don't have that, at those times you can pray and say, God, I've honored you with your money, with my money. Can you help me? And I've seen the most beautiful answers to prayer at times where we've had next to nothing. Because all of a sudden, the responsibility for my finances aren't on me, they're on God. And that's good planning. That's good planning. I want to get to the end of my life and have been generous and have honored God. And so part of this good planning is to sit down and count the cost. What is the cost? If I go my whole life and never give away, is it possible I get to the end of my life and realize I made millions of dollars and I never gave anything to anybody but myself and the government? Right? I get to the end of my life and I realize all this time there have been people on the streets, or there have been people in my family who have had needs. And every single time, and this is what happens, when we cast off moral restraint, our minds and our hearts run wild. We go, they don't deserve it, they've made bad decisions. Or, I'm not giving to charity, I found out that one had a scandal, and so they're all going to have scandals, and I'm not going to give them. Or I'm not going to, give money to a church. One time I was hurt by a church. And we all these excuses. You know what? Call it what it is. It's greed. And replace it again and say, am I running wild? Am I doing what I want to do in replacing God? Because the thing you're worshiping isn't God, it's you. And so as we look at a hurting world, we look at all these kind of things, we anticipate it, and we go, God, I'm going to invest in you. I'm going to invest in you. And so part of that plan is doing that. I'm going to put money away. I'm not going to let debt rule my life. I'm not going to fall into the pattern, because in our world, what happens is many of us run wild. And we run wild to the extent where we hurt ourselves. So my challenge to you today is not to make you feel bad. My challenge to you today is to say, when we follow that higher revelation, or when we follow God's ways, and when we do that, the rewards are unspeakable. And after a while, we get going, we go, wow, I've done this for 10, 15, 20 years now. God's amazing. All through that time, I've owned a house, I've bought a car, we've been able to pay our finances, we've been able to groceries. You know, the number one thing at the Wheeler household right now, which is an output, food. It is amazing how quickly we go through food. And I don't know why. I haven't the sweetest clue. I put it in the fridge, I go shopping, I turn around, it's all gone. Now I know I ate a bit of it, but the rest of it's all gone. But I can look at it and say, I've done things God's way. He will provide. And He is gracious. So I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. I'm telling you this because God's ways are awesome. God's ways bring the greater reward. They may seem difficult, they may seem restrained, all those kind of things. But the restraint that we need, that wisdom provides when we trust God with things, the rewards are unspeakable. So all of a sudden we get to a place and we go, I've been generous, I've been kind, I've been prudent, I've saved, I'm ready for this. Or this emergency happened, but thank God I had this. Or I'm out of work, but thank God He's a great provider, so as I pray, He provides another. Those miracles become a part of our everyday life. And there is nothing as good as that. Where there is no revelation, when we do not have God speaking into our lives. So here's the question for us today. Are we serving ourselves? Or are we serving a higher God? Are we serving Him? Because here's the thing, when we don't have that, when we make that our world, we run wild, and as the scriptures say, we perish by not buying into God's way of thinking. Does that make sense? Yeah? You fed up? Okay. I'm going to show you a quote show right now. We're going to have the baskets go around. And in there's innies and outies. If you have something you want to take out of the outies, they'll go around first. There's pens, offering envelopes, all those kind of things. This message is not a fundraiser for KCC. This message is us talking about godly principles that we all need. Okay? This is not something we're doing because we're trying to beat the bushes. We're doing this because this is what God has asked us to do, to honor Him. And so as we honor Him, let's entrust our lives to Him because that higher moral authority is what we need. Okay? That makes sense? So this is good for you. All right? After the outies come around, the innies come by. They're the ones you put stuff in. If you're a guest here today, allow the offering to pass you by. If you choose to join us, that's one thing. But we want you to be our guest today. If you came over to my house and I served you dinner and you left a $20 bill by the plate, I'd be offended. Okay? So don't offend us. By all means, what we want you to do is just enjoy this service. If you choose to join us and stay around, then by all means, contribute as part of worship. And as we do that, I got some great quotes that are going to come up behind us, and after that, I'll take some questions. Okay?